Hey, Pokedad Fan Club, it's me, Pokedad, and it's been a while since I've done a deck profile. Been at states, went to North and South Carolina states, and have been just kind of busy. But now we're transitioning over to regionals, so regionals is expanded. So we're going to take a look at some expanded decks, and I'm going to try to put these out every few days for you until regional starts. I want to try to give you some of the top tier decks. And we'll even look at some that maybe aren't so good in are good in standard, but maybe not as good in expanded. Maybe see how we can maybe change that a little bit. But I thought there was no better one to start off with than Aaron Tarbell's the infamous Trevenant Break, the one where Shaman does not kill Burst Balloon. And in spite of him having a little bit of a breakdown on one of those live streams, I do appreciate the fact that he did apologize, and he did have a really good deck and he played it very well, and he really did deserve to win Florida regionals in the winter. I'm sorry. So I thought we'd start off with this deck because really this deck is a really good deck. One thing I noticed is Night March was the best deck in format for standard. If you've been keeping up any at all at the Charizard Lounge. However, the last week of states, Trevenant took a big burst that almost overtook Night March for standard, and I expect between Aaron taking the last regionals where actually Breakpoint was used and that last big push of standard with Trevenant, I expect that this is going to be a deck that we're going to see a lot of, and for good reason. It's a really strong deck. So let's hop right into it. For some reason PTCGO won't let me show these in full unless I go into this, so we're going to move it this way and we'll just take a look at the cards. And this should be 4. I'm not sure why that jumped, but all right, so let's start off with the main guy. We got Phantump here. Obviously with Trevenant Break we want to try to get the turn 1 Wally so we can get into Trevenant, but one thing we should point out about Phantump is the Ascension. So if you go second, you don't necessarily need Wally because you can use Ascension, which is a colorless energy, so we can either attach a psychic energy or we can just play our D Valley down, and Phantump can then we can just search our deck for the Trevenant. Now, the Trevenant is basically the bane. Everybody hates this card, especially when they're going second and your opponent can get the turn 1 Wally. In standard, I saw a lot of really good decks that was able to get the turn 1 Wally, but it wasn't quite as consistent in standard, which is going to be typical. But in expanded, it's going to be a lot more. You're going to see the turn 1 Wally a lot more, and we'll discuss why in just a moment. But Forest Curse, if this Pokemon is your active Pokemon, then your opponent can't play any items. That's his ability. And then he has an attack Tree Slam for a Psychic and a double colorless. You can hit for 60 and then also do 20 damage to 2 of your opponent's benched Pokemon. So Trevenant is really the typical spread deck with item lock. And basically you're going to try to take multiple prizes very quickly before your opponent even has a chance to set up because you've got the item lock. So when you get the turn 1 Wally, they're item locked right off the bat before they even get a turn if you're going first. Alright, like I said, Tree Slam is used. We play a heavy count of D Valley. We're playing 4 of them. So Tree Slam then just becomes 2 energies, and we usually just put 2 psychics on there, and we can hit for 60 and 30. But what's even better is when we go to Trevenant Break, and I'm sorry we can't turn this 90 degrees so you could see it in the right way, but basically all break cards, you play long ways over the other card, and they keep all their abilities and their attacks. So we have Silent Fear as the attack that this break adds, and again it's just a psychic and a colorless. So we can do 3 damage counters to every single one of our opponent's Pokemon with Silent Fear. Again, it synergizes well with the D Valley, so we only need actually one energy attached and a Dimension Valley, and we can Silent Fear all day. Another thing to point out is that Trevenant Break has 160 HP, so he gets a massive 50 HP boost from his 110, which makes this a very hard card to kill. Alright, so let's talk about a couple other secondary attackers and some of our support. Now, in Standard, Wobbuffet was really the only other attacker we had. Wobbuffet is kind of unique in the fact that if you don't have Trevenant, but you can get Wobbuffet in the active, he shuts off all abilities that are non-psychic. So if you're playing like Night March or Greninja or one of those kind of decks, if you get Wobbuffet in the active, they can't use any of their abilities, and especially they can't use Shaman to set up. So a lot of people, I guess the traditional thought is, if you're going first, you want to try to get the turn 1 Wally into Trevenant. If you're going second, you actually want to start Wobbuffet so that they can't play any abilities in which shuts off Shaman and Jirachi. However, one thing you should note about Wobbuffet is it is a two-edged sword, and if you start Wobbuffet and you don't have a way to retreat him into something else, then you could get stuck by not being able to play your own Shamans or your own Jirachis. So he's not the best starter unless we have a Floatstone or a Mystery Energy in our hand to get going. But what he does do is he gives us two things. He gives us different typing because Trevenant is weak to dark, and we know as we go into regionals, there's probably going to be a lot of dark decks. Yveltal looms, and the new Darkrai with the old Darkrai has been making a lot of trouble for people too. So Wobbuffet at least gives us a different typing, so he's not as easy to knock out, whereas Trevenant can be real easy to knock out with an Yveltal. So I should say an Yveltal EX. So Wobbuffet also does another thing for us. He has the Psychic Assault. So again, it's a colorless energy. So if we have D Valley, it just needs one energy, and then Wobbuffet can hit 10 plus however many damage counters are already on there. And so this kind of helps us even up the dark matchup because we play Bursting Balloons on our Trevenants, and we'll talk about that a little bit more. But basically, with the spread damage that Trevenant's putting on and the Burst Balloon, Wobbuffet can usually come in and clean up an EX pretty easy and take a knockout there. Another attacker is Mewtwo EX. This is the old school one. This is the one from Black and White. And it really is the best one to use. I mean, I know some standard players tried to use the new Mewtwo's, but they just don't seem to work as well. But with this card is really good because, again, with D Valley, we can do an X-Ball for just one energy. All right, and if they've got a big Yveltal charged up, we can usually come and counter them with an X-Ball pretty easily, especially, again, if a Burst Balloon has been used to already put damage on that Yveltal. So X-Ball does 20 times the number of energy on both you and your opponent's Pokemon, and we just need one energy in a D-Valley to use it. The other thing that I really like is Side Drive, and really, I'm not really sure why Aaron was upset about the Shaman looping, because it seems to me that Mewtwo EX is really the answer to that issue in this deck. See, with Side Drive, you can do 120 damage, and then you discard an energy attached to this Pokemon. So you just need two energies on it and a Dimension Valley, and you can then Side Drive for 120. And if they fail to put any other Pokemon, then you just knock out that Shaman and win the game. So Mewtwo is actually one of the ways you stop the Shaman looping, and that's why it's very important in this deck. Also, Side Drive is really strong. I mean, 120 for two energies is not bad at all. All right, let's move into... Okay, guys, sorry, I had to stop for just a second, but continuing on. So Shaman EX, we play two of those. This again is to help us dig for one of the things that we need so that we can get the turn 1 Wally. Again, setup is the attack we use. The only bad thing about this deck is it doesn't play any double colorless. So Sky Return is very unlikely in this deck. So once you bench the Shaman, you're pretty much stuck with it. And if they Lysander it up, they're probably going to take a knockout on it. Of course, it only does take 1 energy to retreat, so it is very possible that we can get it out of the active and get back into the Trevenant. But they will Lysander it so that they can get their items at least for 1 turn. Alright, and then Jirachi, 1 Jirachi EX. I would even consider bumping this to 2 just in case one of them's prized. But I will say that this is maybe the star of the whole deck, especially in Expanded. Stellar Guidance is just really, really strong. And as we've gone with more unique supporters, for instance, like Wally, like Delinquent, Stellar Guidance has actually been used not so much for a consistency card, but more for getting that obscure supporter that maybe we only play a couple of. And so that's exactly what this deck does. We use Jirachi almost exclusively on turn 1, unless somehow we have the Wally in hand on turn 1 anyway, to get the item lock off. And we have several ways to get Jirachi, so it makes it very, very consistent to get the turn 1 Wally. Alright, so that is our Pokemon lineup. Let's move into our trainers. Alright, and we'll just go through these kind of quickly. We play Computer Search. This again is another consistency card. This can help us grab the Wally straight out if we need it. Or if we need a draw supporter, we can use the Computer Search to grab that, or we can get whatever we need with it. So discard 2 cards and draw the card you need. Sometimes it's an energy, sometimes it's other. We play 4 balls, if you notice, 7 balls, I'm sorry, 4 Ultra Balls and 3 Level Balls. Remember, Jirachi is only 90 HP, so Level Ball can be used to grab Jirachi. So we have 7 attempts at being able to grab the Jirachi right off the very first turn. So that's just, I mean, that almost, you're going to hit the turn 1 Wally very, very consistently just because we have the 3 Level Balls and the 4 Ultra Balls in the deck. We do play 1 Super Rod. This deck is very shallow, I guess you could say, on energy. It only plays 8. And then also, there's sometimes where we end up sycamoring a Breakaway or a Trevenant away, or we want to reuse ones that we've already been knocked out. And so 1 Super Rod just helps get those cards that we need back. So we play a 1 of those. Any deck pretty much standard nowadays is 4 VS Seekers. So we're playing 4 of those to help us recycle and reuse our supporters. Alright, and then let's move right into our supporter line. We play the 1 AZ. This can be used for a couple of reasons. We can, if we've got another Trevenant Break ready to go, we can use the AZ to heal that one and then put another one up, and we can start building that one up again. So it can be used as a healing supporter, but also to pull Jirachi and Shaman off the board so that our opponent can't get easy prizes. So we play the 1 of AZ. Play 1 Colress. Colress is pretty much a staple in most expanded decks because most of the time you're going to fill your bench up really high, and with decks like Raichu, Bats, and Mega Rayquaza colorless, and using the Sky Field, there's a potential that you could get, 16 cards, I think. The most I've ever drawn off of a Colress is 13 in tournament play, but it is literally a very good card. Usually, if you get it late game, you can draw anywhere from 8 to 10 cards, or like I said, more if Skyfield is in play. 1 of Delinquent. This is just actually, this card is actually becoming one of my least favorite cards. Not because I I don't like using it. I just hate it being used against me. It's very, very trolly, because it can kill 2 birds with 1 stone against your opponent. If they've got their stadium out, you can discard the stadium, and it's actually making it so that there's more and more decks that don't play stadiums, that just use this as their kind of stadium removal to equalize the game. And then at the same time, it causes your opponent to discard 3 cards from his hand, his or her hand. So you can, and I know some people say, well, I have a sycamore in my hand, I'm just going to hold that. Yeah, but you still got to discard 3 resources, and there are probably 3 resources you don't want to get rid of. It may be an energy, it may be a Pokemon, it may be something that you were holding as a tech that you needed for later on. So even though people say, oh, it's not going to stop me, it can still be a very big, strong card, and very overpowered in some ways. 1 Lysander. Now, we are doing a lot of spread damage, so we don't generally have to play a Lysander, but this actually helps in the mirror match, because then we can Lysander something of theirs up, and then we can get our items back. There's a very good chance if you're playing the mirror match, you're both going to be item locked, and it's going to be really supporters that help you determine if you're going to win that game or not, and so 1 Lysander will help with that. Also, one thing I should mention about Delinquent is, other than Dark, the other deck that really can hurt Trevenant Break is Lightning and Water decks, Mega Manectric and Greninja, and I don't know, so those kind of decks that use Rough Seas. Basically, if you put 3 damage counters on everything, then they're just going to heal it off every single turn. And so Delinquent can get that Rough Seas out of there, even if you don't have the D-Valley. Or sometimes you have to throw D-Valleys away. Delinquent is that extra stadium that you may need down the road. Alright, moving on, we play 2 N. N is just, again, allows you to shuffle your deck into your hand into your deck and draw as many prize cards you have. This card is going to be reprinted in Standard very soon, so we'll be seeing this played a lot. But it also is just, it's a really good card. In game, if your opponent gets far ahead, you can get them down to 1 or 2 cards, and many times you can just come back from that after a well-timed in. 4 Sycamores or 4 Junipers, depending on what you want to play. I know a lot of old school players that are before me, prefer Juniper, but I came in around Sycamore, so I prefer Sycamore. But discard your hand and draw 7. We play 4 of those. We talked about Wally already. We play 2 of those to help us get the Trevenant Break out right away. And we only, we could play more, but we're going to pretty much play for the Jirachi play every turn, every first turn. So all we want to do is make sure that it's not prized. And so that's why we play 2. Gives us a less likelihood of them being prized. 4 D-Valleys, it's just really necessary. It's like our energy. The reason we can play a low count of energy in this deck is because of D-Valley. So it's like our energy for us. So we play 4 of those. We also play 4 Bursting Balloons. This is what helps in EX decks, and also against especially the Dark decks, being able to put damage counters on them, and then followed with a Bursting Balloon. They either have to decide not to attack you, which is going to give you a free another putting damage counters on your opponent, or it's going to be they're going to have to take the 60 to them, and then that allows us to clean up with Wobbuffet, especially when we're playing against EX decks. And then we play 2 Float Stones. This is to get Wobbuffets out of the active, even though we can use Mystery Energy. Also Shamans, and if we somehow start Jirachi, and it does happen, we can get Jirachi out of the active there. Also, hopefully we can get into an AZ and maybe AZ him up later on, but anyway, so Float Stones for that. And then our energy counts, we play just 3 Mystery Energies. and 5 psychic energies. And again, this was the deck that Aaron Tarble used to win at Florida, so it's a very, very consistent deck. There is a way to get around the Shaman looping. Basically, Mewtwo and N are your two ways to get around it. However, if you still feel like that's not enough, you could change out one card maybe for a Headringer. A Headringer seems like a very strong card, and then follow it up with an N and get the other Shaman out of their hand. That could be devastating for them. However, this list is so consistent. I don't know what you would take out for a Headringer. Maybe you could take out the Super Rod, or maybe you could lower your ball count to 6 instead of 7. But then again, now you're lowering your consistency. So, in my opinion, it's probably just best to stick with what works. And since I think the only regionals that is not going to be XY through Breakpoint is going to be the last regionals. So, that being said, this is still going to be a solid deck to play. Anyway, guys, this is Pokedad. I hope you like the deck profile. We are going to do some I'm going to do some matches, so keep an eye out for that. And I'm also considering doing some live streaming, just so you can see this in action while I'm commentating, and I can also answer any questions that you may have. Finally, one thing you should know is right now PTCGO in expanded format, Trevenant is a humongous deck, so you need to know how to counter it also if you're playing other decks. And as we go through other decks, we will talk about them and how to counter them. But anyway, guys, give me a thumbs up on this. Trying to get 20 thumbs up on this, so if you can just hit that little thumb up for me, I'd really appreciate it. Put your comments below, and if you're new to the channel, please feel free to subscribe. We appreciate every one of you. Anyway, until next time, we will talk to you later. This is Pokedad signing out. Bye.